Now that we know how to solve using our square root method, I'm just going to show you a couple of harder examples here. With these examples, the only thing that's harder is really the order of operations. In what order do we isolate our variable? So I've got two examples. I'll work through one, hit pause, try the other, see how you're doing. So when we're solving our quadratic, anything that's raised to a power of 2, we want to make sure it's set equal to 0 before we start solving. Because we're using the square root method, we can go ahead and ignore that equals 0 because we're going to move everything over. Our goal is to isolate our variable. So to isolate the x, the first thing I'm going to do is add 35 to both sides. So I get 7 times x plus 1 squared equals 35. See how it doesn't equal 0 anymore? But that's okay because we're using the square root method, so that's allowed. Solving by quadratic formula and factoring has to be set equal to 0. So now that I've added the 35 over, I'm going to come in and divide by 7. So I'm going to get x plus 1 squared equals 5. 35 divided by 7 is 5. Now I'm ready to square root, but this time that's not my final step. So when I take the square root, I'm left with x plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And then to get x by itself, I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. So I get the square root plus or minus of 5 minus 1. So my two answers are still there. I'm going to have the square root of 5 minus 1 and negative square root 5 minus 1. We could also change that order just so we know what's underneath the radical. This would be negative 1 plus the square root of 5 and negative 1 minus the square root of 5. This second line looks a little bit cleaner. It's easier to read. The middle line's a little bit fuzzy, but they are both correct. This one, just a little bit clearer of what we're reading. Okay, that's a harder example. We had a step to do after we take the square root, but our goal is still the same, isolate x. So go ahead and give this one a shot. Come back and check your work. All right, so here I'm going to subtract the 54. So I get 6 times x minus 4 squared equals negative 54. Divide both sides by 6. So x minus 4 squared equals negative 9. And now I'm ready to square root both sides. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 9. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus 3i. And my final steps, I add 4 to both sides. So x equals plus or minus 3i plus 4. And if I'm going to rewrite this, this is going to be 4 plus 3i and 4 minus 3i. Remember how we talked about complex numbers? We always want to list the real number first, followed by the imaginary number. So 4 plus 3i and 4 minus 3i. Okay, I'm going to get a worksheet up, give you a couple practice problems like this. Enjoy.